It was one of those nights where everything seemed to go wrong. Rain was pouring down hard in Seattle, and the airport was a complete mess. Flights were delayed, people were rushing everywhere, and everyone just looked tired and frustrated. Among all these tired travelers was a young woman in her early 30s. She worked with computers and technology, creating software for different companies. She had flown all the way from the East Coast to attend an important business conference. The flight that should have taken 5 hours ended up taking almost 9 because of weather delays. By the time she finally landed, all she wanted was to get to her hotel room and sleep. She grabbed her suitcase from the baggage claim and took a taxi to the Grand Pacific Hotel in downtown Seattle. The hotel looked fancy from the outside, with its tall glass windows and bright lights, but she didn't care about any of that. She just wanted a bed. At the front desk, a young receptionist handed her a key card with a tired smile. Room 847, 8th floor. Perfect. She dragged her suitcase to the elevator, rode up to the 8th floor, and found her room at the end of the hallway. The key card beeped green, and she pushed the door open. The room was nice enough. One large bed, a small desk, a bathroom, and a window with a view of the rainy city. She didn't even bother unpacking properly. She just pulled out her pajamas, took a quick shower to wash off the stress of travel, and collapsed into bed. Within minutes, she was fast asleep. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, another traveler was also making his way to the same hotel. This was a young man in his late 20s who worked as a writer and reporter. He was in Seattle to work on an important story about people losing their homes because rent was getting too expensive. It was a serious topic, and he was hoping this story would help him get back into big newspapers after losing his previous job. He checked in at the front desk around 11 at night. The same receptionist, now looking even more tired, handed him a key card. Room 847, 8th floor. He thanked her and headed to the elevator. What neither of them knew was that the hotel's computer system had experienced a problem earlier that evening. During a software update, something went wrong. The system started giving out duplicate room assignments. 2 different key cards, 2 different guests, but the same room number. The young man walked down the 8th floor hallway, found room 847, and slid his key card into the slot. The light blinked green. He pushed the door open, pulling his suitcase behind him. The room was dark, except for a small light from the bathroom. He thought that was strange, but figured maybe housekeeping had left it on. He walked further into the room, and that's when he saw it. Someone was sleeping in the bed. His bed. Or at least, the bed he thought was his. For a moment, he just stood there, completely confused. Did he walk into the wrong room? He checked the number on the door again. 847. That's what his key card said. He looked at the bed again. There was definitely someone there, covered in blankets, sound asleep. He cleared his throat. Nothing. He cleared it louder. Still nothing. Finally, he said, "Excuse me?" The woman in the bed stirred slightly but didn't wake up. He spoke a bit louder. "Hello? Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake." This time she woke up. And when she saw a complete stranger standing in her hotel room in the dark, she did what anyone would do. She screamed. He jumped back, raising his hands. Wait! I'm not a criminal or anything. I have a key card. The front desk gave me this room." She grabbed the blanket up to her chin, her heart racing. "What are you talking about? This is my room. I checked in 2 hours ago." "Well, I just checked in, and they gave me this room too." He pulled out his key card and showed her. "See? Room 847. She grabbed her own key card from the nightstand. "This is 847. You must have the wrong room." They both looked at their key cards. Same room number, same hotel. This didn't make any sense. "Okay, something is seriously wrong here," she said, reaching for the phone on the nightstand. "I'm calling the front desk right now." She dialed 0 and waited. After several rings, the tired receptionist answered. The woman explained the situation as calmly as she could, though her voice was shaking a bit. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry," the receptionist said. "We've had a computer problem tonight. Let me check what rooms are available." They waited. The man stayed near the door, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. The woman sat on the bed, still clutching her blanket. The whole situation was completely bizarre. After what felt like forever, the receptionist came back on the line. "I have some bad news. We're completely full tonight. There's a tech conference, a medical convention, and a wedding party all happening at the same time. Every single room is booked." "Then find me a room at another hotel," the woman said. "I've been trying," the receptionist replied. "But because of all these events, every hotel in the downtown area is fully booked. The closest available room I can find is 40 minutes away." The woman looked at the clock. It was almost 1 in the morning. She was exhausted. The man looked equally tired. The receptionist continued. "I can offer you a roll-away bed. We'll bring it up to the room right away, free of charge, and we'll comp your entire stay. I'm really, truly sorry about this." The woman looked at the stranger by the door. He looked at her. Neither of them liked this situation, but what choice did they have? The woman sighed heavily and hung up the phone. She looked at the man, still standing awkwardly near the door. He looked back at her with an expression that said he was just as unhappy about this situation as she was. "So," he said carefully, "I guess we're roommates for the night?" "I guess so," she replied, not sounding happy about it at all. "But let's get some things straight right now. You stay on your side of the room, I stay on mine. No talking, no weird stuff, nothing. The second the sun comes up, we both leave and forget this ever happened. Deal?" "Deal," he said quickly. "I promise I'm not some kind of creep. I'm just a regular person who got stuck in a really weird situation." 10 minutes later, a hotel staff member arrived with a rollaway bed. It was one of those thin, uncomfortable ones that hotels always seem to have. The man helped set it up near the window, as far from the main bed as possible. The woman stayed on her bed, watching carefully. Once the staff member left, the man grabbed his suitcase and went into the bathroom to change. When he came out in his regular sleeping clothes, he went straight to the rollaway bed and lay down. The woman turned off the main light, leaving only a small lamp on her side. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Outside, the rain kept falling, tapping against the window. Cars passed by on the street below. But inside room 847, 2 strangers lay in the darkness, both wide awake. The woman kept checking her phone. The bright screen lit up her face every few minutes. She would look at it, her expression would change to worry or frustration, and then she'd put it down again. Then a minute later, she'd pick it up and do the same thing. After about an hour of this, the man finally spoke. "Are you okay?" "I thought we agreed no talking," she said without looking at him. "I know, but you seem really stressed about something. And honestly, neither of us is sleeping anyway." She was quiet for a moment. Part of her wanted to tell this stranger to mind his own business, but another part of her, the tired and stressed part, just needed to talk to someone. Anyone. "If you must know," she said, "my whole career might be falling apart right now." He sat up a bit on the uncomfortable rollaway bed. "What happened?" And then, like a dam breaking, she started talking. She told him about her business. 5 years ago, she and her business partner had started a tech company together. They built software that helped other businesses work better. It was her idea, her vision, her dream. They had worked so hard, staying up late nights, missing holidays, putting everything they had into making it successful. Tomorrow morning, she was supposed to give a big presentation at the conference. Important people would be there. Investors with money. Other business owners. This was their chance to really make it big. But just a few hours ago, while she was on the plane, her business partner had sent her a message. He was leaving. taking half of their computer code, their biggest client, and starting his own company. 5 years of friendship and partnership, gone in one text message. And the worst part, she said, her voice shaking a bit, is that tomorrow I have to stand up in front of hundreds of people and pretend everything is fine. I have to give a presentation about our company when there might not even be a company anymore. The man listened quietly. When she finished, he didn't immediately try to fix everything or tell her it would be okay. He just said, "That's really terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you." Something about his simple response made her feel a bit better. She wiped her eyes and asked, "So what about you? What brings you to Seattle?" Now it was his turn to open up. He told her about his job as a reporter, or rather his old job. He had worked for a big newspaper for years, writing important stories about things that mattered. But a few months ago, the newspaper had money problems. They had to let people go, and he was one of them. Since then, he'd been doing freelance work, which meant he had to find his own stories and sell them to whoever would buy them. It was scary and uncertain. He never knew where his next paycheck would come from. "This story I'm working on now," he explained, "it's about people losing their homes because rent is getting too expensive. It's a good story, an important story. But I keep thinking, what if nobody wants to publish it? What if I'm just not good enough anymore? I'm almost 30 years old, and I feel like I'm starting over from zero." The woman turned to look at him in the darkness. "That sounds really hard." "It is," he admitted. "Some days I wonder if I should just give up and get a normal office job, something safe and boring where I don't have to worry all the time." They talked more after that, about their families, their dreams, their fears. The woman talked about how she always felt like she had to prove herself in the tech world. The man talked about how he worried he'd never write anything important enough to make a difference. Hours passed like minutes. They shared stories about their childhoods, funny things that had happened to them, embarrassing moments, proud moments. At some point, the woman made coffee using the small coffee maker in the room. They sat there drinking bad hotel coffee at 3 in the morning, talking like old friends instead of strangers. "You know what's funny?" the woman said. "I've known my business partner for 5 years, and I never talked to him the way we're talking right now. We only ever talked about work, about plans and strategies and money. We never really talked about the real stuff." "Maybe that's why he left," the man suggested gently. "Maybe he never really understood what this meant to you." She thought about that. He might be right. As the night went on, something strange happened. The awkwardness disappeared. The fear and stress they both felt started to fade a little. They weren't alone in their worries anymore. They had someone who understood, even if that someone was a complete stranger they'd met in the most bizarre way possible. When the first light of dawn started showing through the window, they both realized they'd been talking for over 4 hours. Neither of them had slept at all, but somehow they both felt a little bit better than before. Retry S345 Part 3. The morning sun filled the hotel room with soft light. Both of them looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes, but something had changed between them. The tension from last night was gone. They weren't strangers anymore, not really. The woman got up and started making more coffee. The man folded up the rollaway bed and tried to make himself look somewhat presentable. They moved around the room with an easy comfort now, like roommates who had known each other for years instead of just one night. "So," the man said, taking a cup of coffee from her, "your big presentation is today, right? What time?" She checked her phone. "In 3 hours. I should probably go over my notes, but honestly, I don't even know what I'm going to say anymore. Everything I prepared was about the partnership, about our team, about our shared vision. But there is no team anymore. It's just me now." The man sat down at the small desk and thought for a moment. "Can I ask you something? What did you want to build before your partner got involved? What was your original dream?" The woman paused. Nobody had asked her that in years. She sat on the edge of the bed and really thought about it. I wanted to create software that actually helped people, she said slowly. Not just to make money, but to solve real problems. My partner always pushed for the clients who paid the most, even if their projects weren't that meaningful. But I wanted to work with schools, hospitals, small businesses that really needed help but couldn't afford the big tech companies. So why didn't you? He asked. Because he said it wasn't practical. He said we needed to focus on profit first, and maybe later we could do the meaningful work, but later never came. The man smiled. You know what I think? I think him leaving might be the best thing that could have happened to you. She looked at him like he was crazy. How is losing half my company a good thing? Because now you can build what you actually want to build, he explained. You're not tied to his vision anymore. You're free to follow your own dream. Yeah, it's scary. And yeah, it'll be harder. But at least it'll be yours. The woman sat there, letting his words sink in. She had been so focused on what she lost that she hadn't thought about what she gained. Freedom, control, the chance to do things her way. She looked at him with new appreciation. Thank you. I actually needed to hear that. You're welcome, he said. Then he hesitated before asking, This might sound weird, but would it be okay if I came to your presentation? I mean, you said it would help to have a friendly face in the crowd, and I don't have any interviews scheduled until this afternoon. She was surprised by how much that offer meant to her. Really? You'd do that? Sure, he said with a shrug. What else am I going to do? Sleep? I think that ship has sailed. They both laughed. It felt good to laugh after such a stressful night. 2 hours later, they were at the conference center. It was a huge building filled with people in business clothes, all carrying notebooks and coffee cups. Everywhere you looked, there were banners and signs about technology and innovation. The woman was getting nervous again. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held her presentation notes. The man noticed and said, Hey, you've got this. Just speak from your heart. Tell them what you really want to build, not what you think they want to hear. She nodded, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage area. The man found a seat in the back of the large conference room. More and more people filed in until every seat was filled. This was clearly an important session. When the woman walked onto the stage, the man could see how nervous she was. But then she looked out at the audience, found him in the back row, and he gave her a thumbs up. She smiled slightly and seemed to relax. She started her presentation. At first, she followed her original notes, talking about technology and business strategies. But then, right in the middle, she stopped. She looked at her notes, then looked at the audience and made a decision. You know what? She said. I'm going to be honest with you all. Yesterday, my business partner left our company. He took some of our work and our biggest client with him. I spent all night wondering if I should even come here today. The audience got very quiet. Everyone was listening carefully now. But then I realized something, she continued, her voice getting stronger. For 5 years, I've been building someone else's version of my dream. I've been playing it safe, chasing money instead of meaning. And you know what? I'm done with that. She closed her notes and spoke directly from her heart. She talked about the kind of technology she really wanted to create. Software that helped teachers connect with students better. Programs that made healthcare more accessible to poor communities. Tools that gave small businesses the same advantages that big corporations had. Yes, it might take longer, she said. Yes, it might be harder. But I'd rather build something that matters than something that just makes money. Because at the end of my life, I don't want to look back and wonder what I could have accomplished if I'd just been brave enough to try. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the room erupted in applause. People stood up. The man in the back row was clapping harder than anyone. After the presentation, something amazing happened. People rushed toward her. Business owners wanted to work with her. Investors wanted to hear more about her ideas. Other tech professionals said they'd been waiting for someone to talk about technology this way. One older gentleman in an expensive suit handed her his business card. He ran an investment fund that specifically supported companies trying to make positive social change. "Call me," he said. "I think we should talk about funding your vision." The woman could barely believe it. She'd been so afraid that being honest would ruin everything. Instead, it had opened up more opportunities than she'd ever imagined. She looked for the man in the crowd and finally spotted him near the exit. She pushed through the people and reached him. "Thank you," she said, slightly out of breath. "If you hadn't asked me those questions this morning, I never would have had the courage to do that." "You already had the courage," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." His phone rang. He looked at it and his eyes went wide. "Sorry, I need to take this. It's my editor." He stepped outside to answer while she went back to talk with the interested investors. But even as she spoke with them, part of her mind was wondering about him. Who was he really? And why did it feel like meeting him had changed something important in her life? When he came back inside 20 minutes later, he looked excited and worried at the same time. She excused herself from her conversations and walked over to him. "Good news?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "My editor read the rough draft of my story. He wants me to dig deeper. Apparently, there's something bigger going on with the housing situation here. He thinks it could be a really major story." "That's great," she said. "Yeah," he agreed, but his expression was troubled. "But I just found out something that makes this complicated." The woman could see something was bothering him. They walked to a quiet corner of the conference center, away from all the busy people. "What's wrong?" she asked. "You just got good news about your story." "You should be happy." He ran his hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "I am happy about the story, but I just found out something that involves you, and I don't know what to do about it." "Involves me? How?" He took a deep breath. "Okay, so I've been investigating this housing situation for weeks now. People are losing their homes because big companies are buying up affordable apartments and turning them into luxury places that regular people can't afford. I've been trying to figure out who's behind it all." "And?" she prompted. "And I just found out it's connected to the Grand Pacific Hotel. The company that owns our hotel is part of a bigger corporation that's been buying up all these properties. They're the ones pushing people out of their homes. That computer glitch last night? It wasn't just a simple mistake. The whole system is falling apart because they're cutting corners, using cheap technology, not maintaining anything properly. They're so focused on making money that they don't care about anything else." The woman frowned. "That's terrible, but what does this have to do with me?" He looked at her seriously. "That older gentleman who gave you his business card, the one who wants to invest in your company? I looked him up while I was on the phone. He's the head of the parent company that owns the hotel chain. He's the one behind all of this." The woman felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. The biggest investment opportunity she'd gotten all day, and it came from someone who was hurting people to make money. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. I've been researching this company for weeks. His name is all over the documents." They both stood there in silence for a moment. The sounds of the conference continued around them, but it all felt distant now. "I have to publish this story," he said quietly. "It's important. People need to know what's happening. But I wanted to tell you first because I know what this means for you. If you take his money and then my story comes out, it's going to look bad for your company. People will think you support what he's doing." The woman felt torn. This was exactly the kind of funding she needed. The investor had seemed genuinely interested in her vision. But how could she take money from someone who was destroying people's lives? "When will your story be published?" she asked. "Probably in about a week. My editor wants me to get more evidence first, talk to more people who've been affected. but it's definitely going to run. She thought about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Her partner leaving, meeting this man in the strangest way possible, her successful presentation, and now this difficult choice. "You know what?" she said finally. "Thank you for telling me. A lot of reporters wouldn't have done that. They would have just published the story and let me deal with the consequences." "I thought about that," he admitted. "My job is to report the truth, not to protect people's feelings. But after last night, after everything we talked about, I couldn't just blindly publish something that would hurt you without at least giving you a warning." "I appreciate that," she said. "And you should publish your story. People need to know the truth. As for me, I'll figure out the investment situation." "You're going to turn him down, aren't you?" he asked. She nodded. "I have to. This morning I gave a whole speech about building something meaningful, about having integrity. How can I say those things and then take money from someone who's hurting people? It would make me a hypocrite." "But this could have been your big break," he said. "You might not get another opportunity like this." "Maybe not," she agreed. "But I'll find another way. I've been in tough situations before. I'll figure it out." He smiled at her with genuine respect. "You know, you're pretty incredible." "So are you," she said. "Not many people would risk their story to warn someone they just met." Over the next few days, they both stayed in Seattle. The woman had meetings with other potential investors, though none as promising as the first one had seemed. The man worked on his investigation, interviewing people who had lost their homes, gathering documents, building his case. They met for coffee every morning. It became their routine. They'd talk about their work, their progress, their challenges. What had started as a bizarre hotel mix-up had turned into something neither of them expected. A real friendship. Maybe even something more than friendship, though neither of them said it out loud. One evening, they met for dinner at a small restaurant near the waterfront. The rain had finally stopped, and the city looked beautiful with all its lights reflecting on the wet streets. "I talked to my editor today," he said over dinner. "The story is almost ready. We're publishing it in 2 days." "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "This is the biggest story I've ever worked on. If I get something wrong, if I mess this up, it could ruin my career forever. But if I get it right, if the story helps people, then maybe all the stress and worry will be worth it." "You'll get it right," she said confidently. "I've seen how hard you work, how much you care about getting the facts straight. The story will be great." "What about you?" he asked. "Any luck with funding?" She shook her head. "Not yet. But I did make a decision. I'm going to start smaller than I originally planned. Instead of trying to build a huge company right away, I'm going to focus on one good project. Something that really helps people. If I do that well, the funding will come eventually." "What kind of project?" he asked, curious. "There's a nonprofit organization here in Seattle that helps homeless families find housing. They have almost no technology. Everything is done on paper, and it's a mess. I'm going to build them a system to manage everything better. For free." His face lit up. "That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing you talked about in your presentation." "I know," she said, smiling. "And here's the thing. While I was talking to them, I learned that a lot of their clients are people who were displaced by the same company you're investigating. So, in a way, we're both trying to help the same people." They looked at each other across the table, and something passed between them. An understanding, a connection that went deeper than just friendship. "Can I tell you something?" he said quietly. "Of course. When I walked into that hotel room and found you there, I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened. I was tired, frustrated, just wanted to sleep. But now I think it might be the best thing that ever happened to me." She felt her heart beat faster. "Really?" "Really," he said. "Meeting you changed something. You reminded me why I became a reporter in the first place. Not to become famous or win awards, but to help people by telling important stories. I'd forgotten that, but talking to you that night, Hearing about your dreams and your values, it reminded me of my own. You did the same for me, she said softly. You asked me questions nobody else ever asked. You helped me see that losing my partner wasn't the end of my dream. It was actually the beginning of my real dream. They sat there in the restaurant. Two people who had met by complete accident, realizing that maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe it was exactly what both of them needed. 2 days later, the story was published. The man's investigation appeared on the front page of a major news website, and within hours, it was everywhere. People were reading it, sharing it, talking about it on social media. The story laid out everything in clear detail: how the corporation had been buying affordable housing properties across the city, how they converted these homes into expensive hotels and luxury apartments, how hundreds of families had been forced to leave their neighborhoods because they couldn't afford the new prices. The story also exposed the safety problems, the cheap computer systems that kept breaking down, the lack of proper maintenance, the way the company cared more about profit than about people's safety or well-being. It was powerful, well-researched, and impossible to ignore. The woman read the story that morning in her hotel room. A different hotel room now, at a smaller, locally owned place. She felt proud of him. Every word was carefully chosen, every fact was checked, every interview was respectful. This was real journalism. This was the kind of work that actually made a difference. Her phone rang. It was him. "Have you seen the response?" he asked, and she could hear the excitement in his voice. "I'm looking at it right now," she said, scrolling through the comments and reactions online. "Everyone's talking about it. This is huge." "The mayor's office just announced they're launching an investigation," he said, "and 3 different law firms have contacted me. They're filing lawsuits on behalf of the families who were displaced. This is really happening." "I'm so happy for you," she said genuinely. "You did something important. You helped people." "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "That night in the hotel room, when we talked about doing work that matters, that conversation kept me going through all the hard days of research." They agreed to meet later that afternoon. The woman had some good news of her own to share. When they met at their usual coffee shop, she was smiling in a way he hadn't seen before. "Okay, what happened?" he asked. "You look like you just won the lottery." "Better than the lottery," she said. "Remember that nonprofit I told you about? The one helping homeless families? Yeah, the one you're building the system for. Well, I've been working on it for the past few days. Just basic stuff, getting their information organized, creating a simple database. Nothing fancy. But this morning, they showed it to some of their partner organizations. And now I have 3 more nonprofits asking me to build similar systems for them." "That's amazing," he said. "But wait, there's more," she continued, clearly excited. "One of those organizations has connections to a foundation that funds social impact technology. They want to meet with me next week about a grant. It's not as much money as that other investor was offering, but it's enough to actually start my company the right way, doing the work I actually care about." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "See? I told you it would work out." "You did," she agreed. "And you were right." Over the next few weeks, both of their lives changed dramatically. The man's story continued to grow. More news organizations picked it up. He was interviewed on radio shows and podcasts. A publisher contacted him about turning the investigation into a book. His old newspaper called and offered him his job back, but with a promotion and a raise. He could write whatever stories he wanted, focus on investigations that mattered. The woman's company officially launched. It was small, just her and 2 other people she hired. But they were doing good work. They built technology systems for nonprofits and community organizations that couldn't afford the expensive big tech companies, schools that needed better ways to track student progress, food banks that needed to manage their inventory, community health clinics that needed patient management systems. Every project made a real difference in people's lives. But the most important change was personal. The man and woman stayed in touch constantly. Texts every morning, phone calls every evening, video chats when they were too busy to meet in person. They had coffee together whenever they could, dinners when their schedules allowed, long walks through the city talking about everything and nothing. What had started as an accidental meeting in a hotel room had grown into something neither of them had expected. They'd become part of each other's lives in a way that felt natural and right. 6 months after that rainy November night, the man had to return to Seattle for a follow-up story. The corporation from his investigation was facing serious consequences. Lawsuits were settled, new regulations were passed. Some of the displaced families were getting compensation and help finding new homes. He wanted to write about what had changed since his original story. The woman picked him up from the airport. When he saw her waiting at arrivals, his whole face lit up. When she saw him, she felt that same flutter in her chest that she'd been feeling more and more lately. They spent the day working together. She showed him the nonprofit projects she was working on. He interviewed some of the people she was helping, getting their stories for his follow-up article. They made a good team. Her technology expertise and his storytelling skills complemented each other perfectly. That evening, they walked along the waterfront. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city looked beautiful. "Can I tell you something kind of crazy?" the woman said. "Always," he replied. "Sometimes I think about that night. The hotel mix-up. How angry and scared I was when I first saw you in my room. And I can't believe that was the same night that changed my entire life." "I think about it too," he said. "I actually kept my hotel keycard from that night. I know it's silly, but I couldn't throw it away." She laughed. "I kept mine too. I thought I was the only one being sentimental." They stopped walking and looked at each other. The moment felt important somehow. "I'm really glad I walked into the wrong room that night," he said quietly. "Or the right room, or whatever it was." "Me too," she said. He took her hand. "I know we're in different cities. I know our lives are complicated and busy. But I don't want to keep pretending we're just friends, because I think we both know this is more than that." She smiled, feeling nervous and excited and happy all at once. "I think I knew that after our first all-night conversation. I just wasn't ready to admit it." "And now?" he asked. "Now I'm ready," she said. They decided to make it work, despite the distance. He would visit Seattle regularly for work. She would come to his city when she could. They'd figure it out together, the same way they'd figured out everything else since that bizarre night. A year later, they were back at that same waterfront spot. He had moved to Seattle permanently. His book about the housing investigation was doing well, and he could write from anywhere. She had expanded her company. They now had an office with 10 employees, all working on technology projects that helped communities. "Remember when you asked me what happened next?" she said, leaning against him as they watched the sunset. "I remember everything about that night," he said. "Well, this is what happened next," she said, gesturing to the life they'd built together. "We took a random accident and turned it into something real, something good." "Best hotel mix-up ever," he said, and they both laughed. They still told the story sometimes when people asked how they met, about the rain and the computer glitch in the shared hotel room, about staying up all night talking to a complete stranger, about how sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes, about how two people who should never have met ended up changing each other's lives. And every time they stayed at a hotel together, which was fairly often now with all their travel, they would joke about checking the room number twice, just to make sure there wouldn't be any more surprises. Though honestly, they both agreed, they wouldn't have minded if there were. After all, the first surprise had turned out pretty well. The story of two strangers in one hotel room had become the story of two people who found exactly what they needed when they least expected it. Not just professional success or career breakthroughs, though those came too, but something more valuable, someone who understood them, someone who challenged them to be better, someone who reminded them what really mattered. And it all started with a computer glitch, a rainy night, and the courage to stay and talk instead of running away from an uncomfortable situation. Sometimes life's best moments come from its strangest coincidences. Sometimes the wrong room turns out to be exactly the right place to be.